When I first decide to make a card, I usually pull out my sketchbook. In my sketchbook, I will make many little thumbnails of different card ideas, and then I'll choose a design. Here I have chose a 3-panel layout card. And basically what we're going to be doing is drawing in the swirls on one edge. That's usually my first thing I do. I draw the swirls and then I balance the swirls out with flower groupings. After that, I will put the leaves in the card. After sketching the top part of the card, I'll go and sketch around the edge of the top flap and then make the main image that will capture that flap underneath. Then I will lay out the images. I've kind of worked backwards here, but then I will lay out the images. The pens I use are this Pentel brush pen, and I will show you how to fill it in a minute, and this calligraphy fountain pen. I also use, this is the ink I use. It's carbon black ink, and the only place I found it is from Jet Pens, but it's a really awesome ink, and I use that Doppler to fill it. You fill the pen by taking off the back side of it and undoing the cartridge from the brush tip. Then you take your ink out of the carbon black and just put droplets into the cartridge. Then you reset everything, put your end on your pen, and you're ready to go. The brush pen is my favorite pen to use, but I also use the Pilot Multi-Ball. It's a very fine tip pen, the fountain pen, and another medium point pen. Usually I use a Sharpie. This time I have a Smashbook black pen. So now I'm going to start inking in the design that I had sketched in earlier. I start by using the brush pen because it gives me a thin, thick line that I really like. And I will sketch around the swirls of the design first. Actually, sketching here, I make a mistake because I didn't look and my lines don't add up. So I should have stayed to the top or the bottom of the swirl. So I make mistakes, you just cover up for them later. In the design that you guys download, that mistake will not be there. And I just go along, and this pen is, I'm actually sketching on the paper has a lot of tooth to it, so the pen is not very clean and I'll have to go over it again. Now I'm creating a decorative edge around the one swirl end of the design, and I'm having to go over the ink lines 2 and 3 times because the paper is a cold press watercolor paper, and that means it's kind of toothy. So if you guys are going to be drawing, I would recommend hot press watercolor paper. You could also use multimedia paper, but it tends to have a little bit of a tooth also. Hot press watercolor paper will make it easier to sketch on. Right now I'm just fixing the edges because of the tooth of the paper. And then I will go back in and start drawing the flowers. I also will fix the mess up there in Photoshop before I make the art ready for you guys to download. Lots of cleanup work here. This part is really boring actually, but I wanted you to see that what I was doing. Now I'm going to switch over to the Pilot Multi-Ball pen because it gives me a very fine line, and I'm going to draw in the flowers. And I like to start in the middle of the flower and do some kind of decorative image. When I draw flowers out initially with pencil, I just make a circle so I know there's going to be a large flower here, a medium flower there. And then when I start in the details with the pen, I actually just start doodling. I don't have a drawing in there. Initially, when you first start drawing flowers, you might want to draw the details with a pencil first. I just tend not to do that because I've drawn so many little flowers. As you can see, there's a big contrast in the line width. Right now it's going to be a very fine line as opposed to the brush pen, which makes a thin, thick line. I will go back later and thicken out some of the lines of the flower just to give it interest. But the multi-ball is just a really good detailing. You need the fine lines and you need thin and thick lines because each design you do should have kind of a line, a plain area, which is a thick area of black, and a tone, which will be your watercolor eventually when we watercolor the design in. So now I'm getting ready to paint the leaves, and I want to go make sure that I draw the same kind of leaves that I drew on top of the image on the bottom of the image, because I tend to draw 2 or 3 different types of leaf designs. I want to make sure that I don't switch and have one kind of leaf on the top and a different kind on the bottom. That would kind of look funny. So I always make sure that that's why I showed you what I just did, is that I wanted to look at what I had done initially to make sure I did that below. And you can tell that I kind of balance the design out here with the flowers and the leaves. I'm sticking a little flower in there just because I like to do things in odd numbers instead of even. That's just a personal preference. You don't have to do that. Now I'm going to start drawing flowers in the other areas of the design. I usually try to draw each flower differently in some way. That's just a personal preference. If you want to draw all the same kind of flower, then go ahead and do that. I always change each center, and I always do some other kind of petal design. This flower is going to be kind of larger because I'm only putting one in that area. As I was drawing, I noticed that there was this blank area above the flower there, so I added another leaf into the design. Making sure to keep the same leaf design as I had before. Sometimes I just take a second to take a look at the design and to see if it's going the right direction. And sometimes when I pause when I'm drawing, I'm just taking a look to see, what flowers I want to put where, or what design I want to put on that certain flower. As you can see, it takes a long time to ink in a design. Go ahead and take your time with this part because it's actually a very important part to the whole card. Once you get the hang of it though, you'll be able to draw a card a lot quicker than I'm doing here. I'm just trying to show you the process, so I was working at a slower pace than I normally do. You can see how each different flower it changes. And it looks a little boring now, but once the design has been inked, I will go and add thicker and thinner lines, which will add a huge amount of interest to the image. So right now I'm just correcting some of the rough areas that were created with the brush pen, and I'm going back in and finishing up some of the leaves just to balance things out. I'm adding leaves here and there, thick, thick ones, thin ones, actually little ones, small ones. They're not really thick and thin, they're smaller or larger. So I'm pretty much done, but I took a look at it and I thought that there needed to be one more leaf over here to the side, just because it really kind of ended abruptly. So I added that at the last minute there. Now I wanted to show you the difference between thin lines and thick lines, and see if you look at the card I just put down, it's a lot more interesting because there's thick and thin and dots, and so I'm going to go back and add those lines to make the card look more interesting.